Let's talk about gas. Not the kind you get from Taco Bell and then you pull your woman's head under the covers later that night. Not that kind of gas. Let's talk about fuel. Gas, gasoline, diesel, kerosene. I don't think we'll touch on propane. We're just talking about fuel containers, really, is what I'm going to talk about today. A lot of guys have added me to some prepper groups. Recently, they feel I have some knowledge to add, maybe. And I'm seeing a lot of comments about fuel storage. This morning, I saw a post about somebody saying they're going to buy an elevated tank, and they happen to post a link to the exact one we put in last year. We made a couple videos talking about that. 550 gallons, gasoline, and there's a lot of information, a lot of disinformation. I think it's one of those things where people just repeat what they've heard, but they haven't actually practiced it, right? You can't store gas more than 6 months, it'll go bad. There's some truth to that. It's because of these, mostly. I have fuel that I've had in gas cans, in metal Nato cans that I'll show you here in a minute. Had the fuel in there untreated for a decade, 10 years. Opened it up, can was still full, dumped it in V10 Ford Super Duty, ran fine. Now, I didn't fill the whole Super Duty up with, I'm seeing something float around here. I don't know what in the world that is. I didn't fill the whole truck up, all 40 gallons, with 10-year-old gas. I put one tank in here and there, right? Mixed it up, no problem. I did run that gas in Honda generators and in walk-behind mowers and in some zero-turn mowers with no problem. Did it cause problems later on? I mean, I don't know. We service those. We clean the carbs out. We do stuff with that stuff. I don't have any traceable problems to any of that 10-year-old fuel. I am not telling you store fuel for 10 years. Let's talk about gas cans. The most common gas cans are probably these red ones. These blue ones are meant for diesel, or meant for kerosene. The blue ones are kerosene. The yellow ones are diesel. They look to be the exact same material. You can see this one sucked in here because it was cold in the garage and it's not all the way full. Now, I saw a guy in this group posting a picture to some cans that looked very similar to these, and they had a yellow disc on the back, and they've got that little wafer that pops up and vents. And what he had was, he had all his vents open, and I just commented, I said, so those cans are full of, they're empty, right? They don't have any fuel. And he goes, no, they're all full. What do you mean, question mark? And I said, well, in gasoline, it's the lightweight volatiles that burn. You know, when you, as a kid, you probably saw in science class and stuff, they would take a match and drop it in a bucket of gasoline and it didn't explode, it didn't catch fire. But you dump a little of that gas out on the sidewalk or on the concrete and you light it and it burns. That's that fuel vapor you see when you're fueling or you're moving gasoline around and you see that shimmer, that mirage. That's the explosive part of gasoline. Diesel is way more stable. It doesn't do that. You hear JP8 and jet fuel. Those are different types of diesel fuel. The gasoline is the more dangerous part. I have two elevated fuel tanks right here close to the building that are diesel. My gasoline tank is way away. Why? Because that's a bomb if that thing blows up. If diesel catches on fire, it doesn't tend to explode like gasoline will. The diesel tanks have different venting on them than the gasoline tank does. So he's like, well, I've kept it this way for 35 years. I don't have any problem with it. I'm like, good for you. I'm not telling you what you're doing is wrong. I'm simply saying you're losing most of the explosive part as that vents off. And I said, if you keep that in a shed or your garage where you have a standing pilot flame or you might get a spark, you risk the potential of an explosion. And he's like, well, it hasn't happened in 35 years. More power to you. But you are giving information to people who might look to have the same situation, but a slight deviation of your circumstances. Maybe you're going to tell some soccer mom that she can store this fuel in her garage, in her stack and pack apartment, and she lives right above there, and it's way more airtight the way they've built new homes. And maybe that pilot light sparks on, or maybe something sparks and she's had these vents open because you told her don't vent them because they expand and the can will swell up. Well, the can swells up, but you're not losing as much vapor. And I say that With these new fuel cans, they don't have that, right? They still will breathe, they'll breathe. The lightweight volatiles over time will piss and seep through this plastic. So what's your next best option? These are fine. I still use all of these. We use them just for moving fuel from the bulk tank that we're gonna pretty much use the same day to put in lawnmowers or generators, stuff like that. The other thing you don't take into consideration with some of these, like this thing here with this type of valve, there's no hose. You have to kind of hold that and try to pour it in the hole or use a funnel. These ones, at least you can kind of put this in the receptacle. This is probably the better version of them, and it still is terrible. California Air Resource Board's CARB, 48 states have signed on to that nonsense, and they have taken a totally usable gas can that we've used for over 100 years and regulated it and put a tax on it. Somebody's always got their hand out. It's about somebody making money. Anytime something happens for the environment, they sell it to the masses as that, but it's always somebody making money. So out of those valves, this is the best. It still chugs. It still has a lot of problems with it. From there, you go to these here. Now these things, I think they cost about $30 a piece. You can get 2 of them for maybe under 60 bucks. They come with a hose. The newer ones have these metal bands that are pressed on. It's got a little filter mesh inside. You have a cap, PVC right here, comes off. I carried these. I carried 5 or 6 of these across behind the back seat of a Yukon for years in San Diego. And the inside temperature of the truck would get 200 degrees. Out in the desert while we were riding dirt bikes, it would get 300 plus degrees. You would get in the truck and smell a faint gasoline smell, but not bad, right? You would open the windows up, 30 seconds later, that smell would be gone. Is it bad for you? I'm sure it's bad for you cumulatively. I'm sure it is. From here, we got Nato cans. Now the problem everybody had with Nato cans is there's literally probably 100 versions between Germany, Norway, Latvia, Sweden, Spain. Everybody's got these cans, right? You either have this or you have the plastic ones like the United States uses. And those have their own problems. These have this cam lock and there's a rubber gasket under here. These things, you have these in your truck, you never smell gas. If you smell gas, you have a bad seal or you have a seam that has started to piss, and you will more than know it when that happens. These, I carry these sideways like this on a roof rack on many of the vehicles. These are the cans that I had fuel in for 10 years. I still hold fuel in these cans. They're great. We used to sell these by the pallet. I would get half of a semi-truck full, put these online, double our money on the sale, and they would sell literally in 60 minutes. It would take us 3 days to get all these cans out of here in boxes of 12. You can still find these if you look around. There are a lot of copies of these. See how this seam is recessed inside here? The Chinese copy, this seam sits outside. If it seems too good to be true, it's because it's too good to be true. These go for about $75 a can. When you see them online, that is one of the things you want to pay attention to. This video is not about Nato cans. If you search Nato cans online, there are a lot of good resources. There's whole websites put together just information. You should see that they're not just tack welded on, right? They're actually seamed in. This handle, you want to have 3 handles. Why? Because if you're holding it yourself, you hold it by this one. If you're tired or weaker, you hold it by 2. Or you and another guy can now carry 3 in this manner. And that's what that's for. And then everybody gets stuck on the nozzles for these things. I forgot to bring a nozzle over here. They have a nozzle that cams right in. Just because you buy a Nato jerry can nozzle doesn't mean it will fit your Nato jerry can. But that aside, you shouldn't be using that nozzle anyways. It chugs, it takes forever to fill with that. What you want to use on any of these cans, unless you've got like this is very, very convenient. You just put it in and you just elevate it. With these Nato cans, we're going to use a jiggler siphon. Do you hear that? There is a glass ball right there inside that. It will drive you insane if it's in the back of your SUV. I take a piece of foam and I jam it in there to where I can't hear it rattle anymore. There are many that look like this. There are not many like this. The super siphon is the real one, okay? That glass ball. You see this silicone tubing? It's stiff. It's thick wall silicone tubing. It takes me 2.5 minutes to empty 5 gallons of fuel into the fuel neck on any of my trucks. I keep 6 of these across the back of the Super Duty. I keep 5, maybe 6 across the back of the Yukon when they're on the roof. Obviously, you're going to have to move them from there. But when these things are in the back of the truck, I can put this in the fuel neck and I can fill from any place in the truck. I can mount 4 sideways, I can mount sides, I can mount 4 behind a toolbox like this, or I can mount 6 this way, okay? Now you will see these at Walmart and all of your Tractor Supplies. I tell you, buy the real one, right? The one with the glass ball. You will see others. Just look for Super Siphon. They have their own website. You can sometimes find them on Amazon. We were a dealer for these. We brought in the drive engines, that's what this is called. We bought 1,000 of these and we put our tubing on these and we sold these. We no longer have them. We've got too much other shit going on than to have to put tubing on and heat it up and put it on, right? Why do you not want the other ones? Because the other ones come and they've got kind of a pink hose to them. They kink. And wherever that kink is, it chugs every time it hits that kink, and a lot of times it will kick your siphon off. It'll just make the siphon end right there. The other thing that happens is they have a big black kind of rubbery ball inside. Most of those for some reason have a spring behind them. Seems great. You don't need the spring to push it down to hold the siphon, but I've had them, 3 of them I've owned. I've actually owned a dozen of them. 3 of them went bad. And somehow that spring inside gets twisted sideways. And those tend to be crimped on with this metal band. So you can't just fix it on the side of the road without some tools or some doing. You can bypass all that nonsense by getting the real one. And I would tell you, when you buy these, buy 6 of them. Keep 1 in each vehicle. Keep 1 in your garage. Keep 1 in your lawnmower shed. Keep them wherever you need to get them. These are great things to give to people as gifts, right? Stocking stuffers, whatever. The price on these might be, I'm guessing $12 maybe. I don't know nowadays. But you can, and mark on them, right? Write on them with a Sharpie. Fuel, water, Roundup, whatever you need to. They work amazing. When I was a kid going to gun shows, when we were doing gun shows, man, it's probably been 30 years. There was always some guy there, and all his booth was, it was a little table, and he'd have a 5-gallon bucket, and he'd get it going and piss the water into here, put that on the table, piss the water down. They worked amazing, right? This takes care of all of your funnel, all of your nozzles not fitting, all of your chugging problems. It takes care of everything. This handles all of that. Now, let's talk about these cans. Here's some things I've never heard anybody say. These cans, when they get hot, they puff up. They swell out the sides, okay? It's all right. You will see surplus ones of these, and they'll work for you for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden, 1 out of your 20, when it gets hot, will have a little mist spray of gasoline. That one no longer goes into circulation. I still use those. I just don't keep them in my trucks. I don't keep them where it's hot. I fill them up, and typically they don't piss when they're out of the sunlight, okay? Or just retire that one. You bought them for, you bought them surplus, they're cheap. You've got a bunch of these things now, hopefully. When you open these up and they're swelled up, it will empty a gallon of gas. It will spray it all over you in your face, okay? So when you carry these, carry a beach towel or something to keep over the top, and that's going to spray all that fuel vapor into that towel. That towel is sacrificial. It gets left on the side of the road. How many times have you heard oily towels have just spontaneously combusted? That shit happens in the right circumstances. That towel, go ahead and litter. Leave that motherfucker on the side of the road. You don't want it getting a spark. You don't want a gas-covered towel in the back of your truck where you're on the way to Walmart and some asshole throws a cigarette butt, catches on fire. You don't want that happening. Just if you have to, for some reason, open this up in a summer situation, every one of them will puff fuel out. So have some way to cover that. When it's cold, they suck in. These are extremely cold, right? So I always have gloves where I have my gas cans. You can have your fancy Ninja, your Ninja britches and your Ninja gloves, $35 mechanics gloves, cool. You're gonna get gas on them, highly possible. I like just a nice pair of leather work gloves. We used to buy a pack of 3 of these at Costco and Sam's Club. I bought hundreds of these. They're kangaroo hide, I think. keep a pair of gloves where you keep those. Also, when it sucks in, it's, instead of pressure, it makes a vacuum. It sucks that in. It's extremely hard to open that valve. Carry a flat-bladed screwdriver, a chunky one, right? A big one, and you're going to be able, that way, you're going to be able to lever it. Have a long one. See how this short one barely catches that? Could you do it off of here? Sure you could. But if you have a long screwdriver, you can just pry it up with that, okay? So screwdriver, set of gloves, siphon. Now what's the difference in the colors? Typically blue is kerosene, red is fuel, as in gasoline, because they're all fuels, and yellow is diesel. Most places it's not going to matter. Some places, San Diego, you will get some overzealous attendant at a gas station that is, his life is just to catch you trying to put the wrong fuel in the wrong color can. I had it happen. We had somebody give me shit 15 years ago probably, San Diego, putting gasoline into green cans. It got to the point where we would literally sneak up. We had some major fires, right? So our plan is to leave, and we're going to leave several hours. If you get caught in traffic, if you have to divert, your normal route doesn't work, the slower you move in your truck, the more fuel your vehicle burns. So we would roll up in the evening and get on the outside pump and just fill that up, and it was almost like we were committing a crime in San Diego. I have heard people tell me that they've had law enforcement officers in California stop them and give them a hassle over these gas cans. I've heard of people having a hassle over multiple gas cans. You're only supposed to be able to carry, I think, one gas can down the roadways. Here in Tennessee, we roll with trucks up on roof racks, fully visible. Nobody's ever said anything. Don't be an asshole. You're not going to have a problem typically. But be aware those laws are there. Who's going to tell on you? Usually somebody you know. If you look in these prepper groups, every time something like that goes up, you have somebody ask a question that they legitimately don't know the answer to, and you'll have 50 answers and 20 of them are everybody telling them how they're about to commit a crime and you're going to get arrested. It's amazing that people who want to help each other spend so much time almost telling on each other. And that's the case. That's typically who it's going to be. If you store bulk fuel, a lot of places it's not legal to hold so much fuel. You're not allowed to keep it in storage units, all this stuff we know about, right? Don't tell somebody you have it. Elevated tanks. Let's go a little bit further. Let's also talk about, this is a 3-gallon tank. They make a 2.5. They make a 1 gallon. Gasoline weighs what? 5 pounds a gallon about? And no, maybe a little more. And water is a little more. Water's 8, gasoline 7. I don't know. You guys can figure that out if you need to know. Gasoline weighs less than water. The smaller amount of fuel you have to carry, the easier it's going to be for your daughter or your young child or your wife to deal with. If you have a problem with a can going bad, the smaller the can, the smaller volume, the less problem it's going to be. So keep that in mind. Now, when you move fuel, when you store fuel, the larger the container, the less it typically costs you per gallon to store the fuel. What do I mean by that? Let's say these cost $20 a piece, but a 55-gallon drum costs $30 a piece, right? $35 a piece. You can store fuel in the thick plastic containers that syrup comes in. I think they're a weird size. They're like 13 gallons to 15 gallons. You can still take those and roll them on a dolly pretty easily. You can also, if you had to, put them on their side and roll them. 55-gallon drums get a little heavier, cost less per volume for the container. You're typically going to use a hand crank rotary pump or a siphon, a jiggler siphon or something to move that to a smaller container to move that at that point, okay? Then you get into tanks. I have elevated tanks. I have 2 that are 350 a piece. I store diesel in those. They're elevated on a cradle. They don't take any electricity. They run from gravity. You've got a fuel filter in place that's clear. You can see when it's dirty or has any debris or water in it, and you just run it in that manner. And then I have a 550-gallon elevated also, and that was pretty much the limit I could find for an elevated tank. When you get bigger, they're going to be on the ground, in which case you're going to have to use a rotary pump or you're going to have to use an electric pump of some sort. I didn't want to have to mess with any of that. I knew the 2 elevated tanks we had. I wanted something similar, so that's what we went with for the gasoline tank. I will eventually probably add a much, much larger bulk tank. We'll build a containment wall around it, put it on a pad, have power, and then a cover over the top of it. And keep gas in that manner. Now you'll see all kinds of stuff about, oh, you don't need to do that, gas will go bad. You'll see all this information out there, but people are telling you things. They're literally regurgitating things that they have not themselves practiced nor tried. Everybody's an expert, but nobody has an application of it. So now let's talk about treating the fuel. Everybody throws out stable. Stable is not to keep the gas good. At least I don't think it is. Stable is to keep the gasoline that's ran through your carburetor from eating the shit out of your carburetor and the fill tubes and stuff. The petcock on your fuel tank on your motorcycle is a good example. We used to put gasoline in the bikes, let it sit. We get a new bike, and the old bike would sit for a couple of years with that old stale gas in there, premix usually. And then your new bike would blow up, and you'd go ride your old bike. And it would be a bitch to start. Once it started, though, it ran. It wasn't a problem. Now, I've got little bikes in here. If you don't run them for 6 months, you go to use them, and they never start. And you start doing the breakdown on them, and it's that filler valve down in the gas tank that's literally eating the copper away. It's eating the copper tube away. A lot of them have plastic. They've made them it's almost like they made them to fail, so you have to buy consumable parts for them. That's what the stable's for. There is stable, you hear seafoam. If you want the real shit, buy it once, buy the best. Pry G and Pry D. The G stands for gasoline, the D stands for diesel. It's very impressive. Look at some of their published videos. Look on their website. That's what the U.S. military uses. They have taken old gas. Now, I had gasoline in San Diego years, Y2K. We were the crazy preppers, right? We had fuel cans on the side of the house. Sunlight would hit them. You go out there 6 years later, you go to pick this up, and the handle literally rips off, and it's disintegrated. Between the gasoline rotting from the inside, the plastic, and the sun UV light destroying the handle. And the tank's about a third full. It's like honey. The gasoline has literally turned to almost honey. Pry G, I have not tried this myself, but Pry G's paperwork, their studies, say you can take that old degraded gasoline, put Pry D or Pry G on it, and it will reconstitute it, and you can run it in vehicles. Now, military vehicles will run on a lot dirtier shit and multi-fuel than our, fine tuned vehicles nowadays. Don't make that your plan. But if you want to buy something, Pry G, Pry D, you can get a gallon of it. Comes in smaller containers also. Camping World, which I believe bought Gander Mountain or vice versa. Camping World for the big RV places, they have it. And you can buy it off Amazon. We bought enough of it somehow. Pry G hit us up and asked us if we wanted to be a dealer. I have not set that up. Buy it wherever you can buy it. That is the best product out there for this. You'll hear all these hillbillies, seafoam, this, that, whatever. Okay, do you want the best? If you're storing this stuff, your life probably depends on it. Everything I do as the people I care about and the people I love. I do it as though their life depends on it. So buy that stuff. If you're moving kerosene around, these are very, very convenient in that you have your little kerosene container and you have your kerosene heater, and you just put this in and this goes right to the heater. All your kerosene heaters you buy come with one of these. Consider this a consumable item, okay? There's a little tiny, I don't know if you can see it in here, there's a little red flapper valve right there flapping around. Those get twisted, and when that happens, they don't work anymore. These things cost a couple bucks. Buy 6 of them, put them in a shoebox or something under your bed or in the closet, and you always have one. Literally, you put this in there, you just crush this bulb right here. Here, you can see right there, there's the valve. See it flapping? And then you open this up, and this lets it flow more, and you cap it, and it turns the flow off, and then you can take it out, hold it upside down, take the drippings outside, or put them into your kerosene heater. These are great. Do not rely on them for gasoline. They work fine for moving. Now, you can get battery-powered ones of these and all kinds of shit. These cost a couple of bucks. Plan on just literally every year, plan on throwing it away. If it still works, drain it all out, keep it. Next year, if it works, great, but always have a backup one. I don't know what else to tell you. These things come, these VP, and you can get a lot of brands. Just look up Race gas can or Race jug, Race fuel jug. VP, we used to run VP Race fuel in the dirt bikes and stuff. You don't have to get this brand. Make sure you get a screw-on cap. just like so, and they have replacements should you crack this somehow. Make sure you get a screw-on one. I like the square ones. They have less dead space between them when you stack them up. If I lived someplace where I couldn't get these, or I just couldn't find these, I used these for years. We probably had 20 of these things. I still carry these sometimes in the razors. You can also go with roto packs. I have them on. I have roto packs on the trucks. They're smaller, they're flatter. If you wanted to put them on the side panniers on a dirt bike or something, they work good for that. And then you don't have to carry 5 gallons each, or carry 2 gallons and have it splashing around. So the roto packs are cool. They make all kinds of sizes. They make doubles. They're great. They fit in baskets on 4-wheelers. I didn't think to have one here. You can check them out. I would not make that my mainstay of bulk storage. When you're starting out, if you can get the Nato cans, those are the way to go. Have one of these for convenience, just for moving it from there to there. These no spills, you can get these off Amazon. And there are guys also, since they've banned all these damn nozzles, there is a whole kind of underground market that's popped up selling just nozzles to make these damn cans work the way they were supposed to work. You can research that all on your own. I just wanted to give you a little bit of information. When you're storing fuel, store the highest octane you can, plan on losing some of it. 92, 91, whatever. If you can get non-ethanol gas, buy non-ethanol gas. A lot of the gas pumps around here have non-ethanol gas. It's kind of a mystery to guys that don't know, as it was me just a couple of years ago. If you wanted to have an elevated tank or a bulk tank in San Diego, you wouldn't get that unless you had some kind of construction license or something. There's no way that a fuel company would have come to my house and put gas in a bulk tank in the backyard. Here, nobody cares. We have 2 different gas oil companies in town here because we have so many farmers. I call them up. I'm like, hey, I want 600 gallons of diesel. I want 550 gallons of gas. Their tanks are partitioned on their trucks. They roll the same load. They roll both fuels in the same load. They'll bring me kerosene, whatever I want, and they fill it up. The cool thing is those guys walk in here and they're like, I love your videos. I watched your live feed last night. It's awesome. We have a good relationship with those guys. Our drivers are awesome. The company is great. If you live somewhere rural. When I lived in San Diego, we had always planned on moving. I was on probation for 3 years after federal prison. So I had 3 years I was just buying preps, right? And we were buying all kinds of like non-electric stuff at flea markets, and we would buy these kerosene heaters. I had seen them, I had never used one. So I would buy kerosene heaters at the flea markets and stuff, and you couldn't get kerosene. It wasn't at Walmart, it wasn't at Home Depot, you couldn't buy it on the pump. I moved to Tennessee, we have 2 gas stations in town that have kerosene. Now, I lived in this place called the Estates, Cedar Lake Estates, right? It's where the rich folk used to live, not anymore. We had kind of some CC&Rs and shit there. I couldn't have a bulk tank. They gave me shit about having firewood in my front yard, stuff like that. So we would fill these tanks up with kerosene and keep them in the basement. It got expensive to keep these tanks with as much kerosene as I like to keep, and I like to keep hundreds of gallons just in case. So I started putting them in syrup containers. They look like little 55-gallon drums, and I was able to buy those for 15 a piece. We just rinsed them out really well, made sure they were dry, and then we would take these and dump these into those, right? They weren't 15 because these are 5 each, so they were 12 or 13 gallon. We would fill those up, put the bung in there. Keep in mind when you have a thing like that, when you have a drum, you need a bung wrench. That top piece that goes in there is called a bung. Some are metal, some are plastic. There are different sizes. You can buy a bung, a nylon one, which won't spark. It's never been a problem to me, but I like the idea of not having to spark. You can buy an aluminum one, a magnesium one, all kinds of these things. When you start looking at them, there's things you don't know until you need it, and then you don't have it. So those bulk tanks, we would hold bulk fuel in those. By bulk, I mean 12 gallon, 13 gallon. And then we would take these and just put these upstairs in the garage, and we would take the kerosene lantern out to the garage and fill it off of one of these with one of these. So I guess that's really I'm sure I'm going to turn this off and have 100 more things. I don't have any kind of outline for you. I think that's it. That's enough to at least get started. If you guys have questions, put them in the question comment section there. If you have comments, leave the comments. We'll do a better video maybe next week, answering all the questions and also having better video footage as well as the elevated tanks and stuff like that. You see a lot of guys saying, you know, don't do this or do this. Just take heed when you're taking somebody's advice, especially off the internet. You don't know who those guys are. And just because they've done something for 35 years and it hasn't blown their house up, that doesn't mean you're going to do it and not blow your house up in just a week. Just because he's had really good luck and hasn't done it, or he just hasn't had a day of bad luck, that doesn't mean it's going to replicate itself for you. The circumstances, I like to say there's 60 seconds on the hand of a clock, and he's at 12 o'clock. You only have to click that hand one time for those circumstances to change to make it vastly different for yourself. So be careful with that. Also, everything you see on the internet, guys giving advice, you don't know who these guys are. Most of them are just repeating what somebody else has said. They've never actually tried it themselves. So take anything you hear that sounds right, take anything you hear that sounds wrong, research it some more yourself. Videos speak 1,000 words. Not necessarily this video, but there's plenty of videos out there of guys showing you fuel storage and fuel treatment. And more importantly than that, there's a lot of companies that actually formulate and make the products doing videos themselves too. So hopefully this answered some questions. Hopefully it gave you some things to think about, and you can take the volume, the whole volume thing. The bigger the tank, the less it costs per gallon to store. That works with water also. If you don't know, I'm John Willis. I own a company called Special Operations Equipment. We make nylon tactical gear, and I've lived in Tennessee for about 15 years now. We call it prepping. Just remember, we call it prepping. Farmers just call it life. If you get with a farmer or somebody that grows or has equipment, grows some crops, they will know all of this shit. And there are farmers all over this place with tanks just sitting there in the sun, beating, and their equipment still runs. So you guys be careful and leave some comments.